Yeah, a warm welcome to our webinar on fight quiet quitting and how to keep your remote team engaged. So my name is Katharina. I'm customer success at Bluequist, and I'm not only doing customer success, I'm also doing stuff like this. So kind of customer education. I'm doing also research and trying to bring the newest insights from a research perspective in practical business processes. And so I'm super happy to have Ben here today. Ben, maybe you want to introduce yourself with a few sentences.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Katharina. So my name is Benjamin. I'm the principal consultant at Assembly Consulting. I work with clients all over the world, mainly remote first or remote only organizations. And I help them optimize organizational setups, their processes, operations in the broadest sense of the word, really. Because for clients, our client size up to 100 employees, usually you can separate people from processes and the people and processes from tools. So we take a very comprehensive approach, and engagement is a very critical topic in remote teams, especially. And this is why I think Katharina and I thought that quiet quitting might be an interesting topic for us to tackle together. So I'm very happy to be here today and share some insights from our consulting work, combined with a lot of scientific and research-based input from Katharina.
Yeah, and additionally, of course, I'm going to show Bluequist. Bluequist is a platform for people analytics. So and we are going to talk about how data can really support to engage your team. But let's start with the topic of quiet quitting. What is it? Yeah. So quiet quitting is all over the place, or was all over the place the last month. So every blog was writing about quiet quitting, also newspapers. You can find many videos on YouTube. All started with TikTok. So there are, I think, two names who introduced this topic to the world. And I asked myself, why is this topic so trending at the moment? So after the Great Resignation, so after the COVID-19 pandemic, many people left their companies and quitted their jobs. And so this was the big topic last year. And this year in fall, or end of summer, fall, the topic quiet quitting came into place. And the question is why? So employees are still overworked. They're now setting boundaries, and maybe because of that, this was a super interesting topic for them. But also for leaders. So they still have their virtual teams. So after the pandemic, we remain remote working, and so leaders are really challenged by leading virtual teams. And so they might think, oh, maybe I have some quiet quitters in my team. And last but not least, the companies. So they have a shortage of skilled workers after the Great Resignation, where many employees left also companies. They also struggled with the challenges of the pandemic. And so they're also worried about quiet quitting. And so this topic became a trend in the last 2-3 months. So, but what is it exactly? And is it a new term for an old problem? This is the big question. So what means quiet quitting? So quiet quitting, this term is kind of misleading, and because it's not quitting the job, but some say it's more like being lazy. I would say not lazy, but not going above and beyond. So not doing extra work, not working overtime, not skipping the lunch break for a project, or not squeezing in another extra project or whatever. Yeah, so only focusing on doing what you're getting paid for. Yeah, so only doing the minimum required. Yeah, so this is what all the different articles say about quiet quitting, and also the videos. So, and I had a look, what does this mean? Is this something new? Yeah, and I found something. So this definition of quiet quitting is super similar to what is meant by not engaged employees. Yeah, they are physiological, unattached to their work and company, and they're putting time but not energy or passion into their work. This is the definition of Gallup. Yeah, and Gallup says, and I think I go with them. So quiet quitters means not engaged employees. Yeah, this means they're not super unhappy with their job and they want to quit. No, yeah, but they're also not fully engaged. This means they're not highly involved in their job. They're not highly enthusiastic about their job. No, they're just doing what they're asked for and not more. Yeah.
I think also, Katharina, one thing to add here, I think that you really carved out well, is it's not a process. It's nothing that's happening, right? Quitting, the word suggests that it's something that is going on and will lead to something. And that's not necessarily the case, right? It will have effects in the future, but it's more status quo. It's more a status you're in rather than a process you're going through, right?
Yeah, right. So the question is, what do you think when you now know the definition, about quiet quitting? What do you think is the percentage of quiet quitters in your team? Yeah, please write in the chat. I'm really curious to know, what do you think?
Okay, so I'll go first. I think it's 0 for us because we're a very small team. But
okay, Ben, can you check the?
Yeah, I'm checking. Sebastian, you did any? What's your feeling about what is the percentage of people in your team that might be quietly in this state of quiet quitting? Judith has her hand raised. Let me see if I can open the mic for you. One sec. Or you just put in the chat. That's also possible. Okay.
I think we can hear you, Judith.
Okay, hello.
Hi,
sorry,
Judith.
I just hi. The chat is deactivated.
Oh my God! Poor
Sorry
man.
about that. No problem.
Thank you so much.
No, but I think it's maybe like 5% or something. Yeah, small number, definitely.
Okay, so it's such an intimate route. Why not open up the mic, Sebastian? If you want to share your number, if you have one.
I guess 10 to 20%. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, this is super interesting. So because I was shocked when I saw the numbers. So I'm a study person, so I looked at a study how many people are not engaged. This means not being highly not engaged, so not want to quit their job. Yeah, you remember the definition. So when you look at this, so Gallup has an annual survey, and you see here the green line are people who are engaged globally, so it's 21%. And people which are actively disengaged, this means they're not feeling good at their work and they want to quit. And the others are highly enthusiastic and super motivated. So, and the rest are quiet quitters. When we go with this definition from Gallup, so 60%, of all employees, are quite quitters. And when you look at the map on the right side, yeah, these are the numbers globally, yeah, and here you see, especially in Europe and North Africa and also Australia, the numbers are even higher. Yeah, so yeah, this seems to be really widespread in the employment. But is this really a problem? Because when 60% of all employees are not engaged and are quiet quitters, is this a problem? So the question is, yeah, when we look at further studies, yeah, we see that highly engaged people or engaged employees really make a difference. Yeah, they're less likely to be absent in the organization. They have a better performance in terms of quality, in terms of profitability, in terms of productivity, yeah, and they're less likely to leave the organizations. There are many studies out there. They show that if you are engaged, your intention to leave the company is lower than if you're not engaged. And because of that, it is important for organizations to have, yeah, engaged employees. And the question is, what can companies or what can leaders can do about it? Yeah. So I looked also at some drivers for employee engagement, and I want to show you. So these are the key drivers of employee engagement. So its purpose is to have a meaningful work, yeah, that you are empowered by the organization, but also by your leader, yeah. You see career opportunities within the organization. You have the opportunity to develop further, yeah. And of course, leadership plays a big role, especially if you have a caring manager, yeah, which focus on individual leadership, because we are all different individuals, yeah, with different needs. And when you have a leader which really look at these needs, this might help, yeah. Communication, also focus on strength, recognition, a good work-life balance, organizational reputation, compensation and benefits, yeah, and also psychological contract, yeah, especially when you look at relational psychological contract. This means, for example, loyalty, yeah, or stability with the organization or with the leader. Really helps here to foster the engagement of employees. To sum it up, you can say it's leadership, it's culture, yeah, and yeah, this HR processes which really can make a difference. And I'm so happy to have Ben with me today because he really can give insights here. So Ben.
Cool. Thank you so much, Katharina. If you could go one page further. And I mean, so now we've heard about what really is necessary for an engaged team, or what helps foster engagement in teams. So the question is, why is it so hard for especially remote teams, right? I mean, to give you a bit of background, as I said, many of our clients are remote first company, and we do see that engagement in remote teams is a even bigger problem than it is in on-site teams, right? And there are a few reasons for that we carved out, both from obvious client projects, but then also from improvement initiatives that we have worked on with clients that actually changed things. And then we said, okay, that must be one of the drivers for an unengaged team. So what is it that's happening? The first thing is very obvious. In remote teams, you have limited exposure to cultural artifacts, right? So all the things that help you experience what a company and a workplace is like many of them are missing in remote settings, right? You don't walk through halls and have a certain vibe to the office. You don't see your coworkers. You don't see what the company looks like. You're not greeted by people on a daily basis, right? The number of cultural artifacts that you're exposed to is much, much more limited, right? It's about, what's the email greetings that you have, how is Slack communication being done, et cetera, right? So there's just a limited exposure to culture, and that, makes it more likely for engagement to drop, right? A second thing is that we often find is less strategic alignment, and all of these things are connected. We will have that phenomenon later as well. All of these things are connected, but what you see is that in remote teams, it's much, much harder to collect people behind a shared vision, right? It's much harder to make sure that people are in their day-to-day work aligned on strategy. There are good tools out there to help foster that, like OKRs or roadmaps, et cetera, but it's just much, much easier for a remote team to lose individual team members that are disconnected from your strategy and from your strategic goals and from what does that mean for me, right? There is no alignment in terms of strategy. It's a big, big problem, because then, circling back to what Katharina just said, the purpose and meaningful work is a problem. If you don't know what you're working towards, then there can't be any purpose, right? Transparency is a huge issue, very closely connected to the strategic alignment, but we use a term quite a bit that's called the white box effect, where you're familiar with the black box probably, where there's a part of something that you can't look into, you don't know how it works. And what we often see in remote organizations, it is flipped. People know exactly what they are doing. They know exactly their field of work, but they have no insight on what's happening before them in the value chain, after them in the value chain, and around them, right? So there's very, very little transparency over other roles in the company, which also limits exchange with other team members. There is little transparency over strategic goals. There's little transparency over the state of the company, right? So that's also a problem. People are just uninformed, and that is bad for engagement. There's little informal communication and team cohesion, and I combined these two topics there. They could also be two separate ones, but informal communication, where you're bump into somebody at the water cooler, you take lunch together, whatever, just helps a lot, both with transparency, right? Strategic alignment, because you talk about work, but also with team building. You talk about non-work related things, you build relationship. And all this is just limited in remote organizations, right? So little informal communication and little team cohesion is a problem. And then, that's a very important one, personal factors and life situations play a role, right? With an informal, with a remote team, you might not be hiring in Berlin or in Toronto or in London, but you're hiring all over the world, and that can mean different things. You're hiring into different cultures. You're hiring maybe people from the same cultural background as yourself, but that are in a totally different life situation. Like, if you have a team member that lives on Bali, and just says, okay, I don't want to be stressed out. I live here, I do remote work, I'm very smart, but I take a pay cut in order to, not have to stretch myself too thin. Then this is a life situation that will influence the engagement of that person, right? So, and the diversity of these sets of personal factors and dimensions is just much wider and much more complex to manage in a remote team. So if we go to the next page and look at the tools that you have as a remote leader or leading a remote team, to tackle these things, they're very closely related to what Katharina showed. One of the first things is goal setting, right? So goal setting will help a lot with purpose. It will help a lot with strategic alignment. So the question is, how do you set goals? Is that very closely broken down on a, we have seen clients that do that on a weekly basis, where they tell, I want you to do this and that this week? Or is it more management by objectives, OKR type of style, where you manage, where you give goals for the quarter, right? Or maybe even yearly goals, depending on your team. So goal setting, both in terms of granularity, but also in terms of team layout can be a thing. So think about this. If you give everybody the individual goals, everybody has their goals to follow. If you give people team goals, they're forced to collaborate. That doesn't make sense always, but can be a way to increase engagement and collaboration. Collaboration being the next topic here. So the question is, what infrastructure do you have in place to foster collaboration? Is collaboration, supported and wanted, or is it more that working with a team of individual players. So how do you support collaboration? Do you use a task management tool that fosters collaboration? What is your communication routine? And again, it ties into the next point, right? But are you collaborative in your approach of doing things, or are you not? And if you're not, then that doesn't mean that your employees have by default to be disengaged. And we'll look into why that is in a bit. But you just have to be aware of how you use this, or how you score on that scale, right? Next is communication. So especially in remote teams, we see a strong tendency to asynchronous communication. Obviously, right? Slack, email, and the likes. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then the question is, again, how do you balance this with synchronous communication? What is a meeting and what is a Slack message? What is a Loom recording and what is an email, right? So the way you communicate, both in terms of medium as well as in terms of style, will have an influence on how engaged your remote team is. And again, it's not about that there's a way of communication that is best for everybody, but you got to find the right way of setting up your communication. So and we'll have some examples in a bit. Then leadership, obviously essential part of creating an engaged team. How do you support your team? How are you able to show the big vision? How are you able to take people and bring them along with you on the ride and make sure everybody's on board and nobody's left behind? And then also, how do you apply all of these things, right? That's a leadership task. Deciding how do you design all of these individual components here. And then transparency, as discussed before, how often do you share company information? How often do you share sales figures or maybe profit reports? How clear is your organization or your team about your strategic goals and where you're at in achieving them, right? We often see in especially remote organizations that there is one single rule for communication and for creating transparency, and that is over communicate, right? Do it again and again and again and again, and then you might have a slight chance that people actually get the message. Not because people are stupid, but just because it's much more difficult to receive these messages in a way that is really, you really make sense of it. So transparency and what you do to create it is another thing. And then something Katharina and I have discussed quite a bit about is the question of recruiting, right? So the things we're looking at here are many the things that you can influence as a leader, as a team leader, CEO, or when you have something to say in the organization, right? That's what you can influence. But there's always a personal factor, right? And there's a nice saying about this the other day about the question of whether the genes or your upbringing is relevant for your what's more relevant for your character, and it's like comparing the question to what is more relevant for the size of the field, the length or the width, right? And this is the same here. You can do everything you want with creating a great work environment with lots of great parameters in terms of goal setting, transparency, and collaboration. If you take on the wrong people that don't fit that environment, it will not work, right? So, and the wrong people in this scenario does just mean people that are not fitting into what you're creating, and then specifically for our case of remote teams, into a remote workplace, right? Because there are just many people that need close personal interaction. So the question who you bring on is very critical. Then org structure, of course, how do you have a very hierarchical organization? Is it flat or tall? But then also other things become relevant here. Role clarity, again, has something to do with transparency. We often see in remote organizations that people are, it's much more common that people are not clear about their roles. Again, this white box effect, right? Like, where does my role end? Where does the next one start? So clarity about org structure, communicating roles very clearly is important. And then also there's something to do with career development, right? If you have a very flat organization, which in our times seems to be the ultimately desirable thing, but that also means that there's hardly any career progression in the classical sense, right? So you will have to design other methods of job enrichment and job enlargement and giving people something to progress towards, right? If you're looking at clients from the investment industry, they are looking at very hierarchical organizations because it's just what people want in that space, and they want to progress through the ranks and approach a partner level, for example, right? So finding the right org structure setup will help tackle disengagement issues, or like help creating a general baseline of engagement. And then lastly, what we often see is a good thing is creating intentional touch points. Being intentional about relationship building, informal communication, team building is something that's very, very important in remote teams. And this could be a team mixer, could be an interest group on your Slack account, right, where people just exchange about cats, or I don't know, right? But you get the point, right? Creating intentional touch points around topics that are work related or maybe not work related is very, very important. So now, how do we apply that? And there's one very short slide, Katharina, if you could go to the next page, which is really just, you have to have these structural elements and you have to apply them individually. And we can already move on to show you some examples of what they could look like. We just carved out 3 different characters here and picked 3 of the topics that I just talked about. And just want to add some color on what that could mean, right? So if you think about goal setting and you have this very experienced, let's say he's a senior sales guy, have this very experienced person, and he says, "Give me some KPIs, I'm good to go." Right? I don't need close management of goal setting. There might be another person that says, "Yeah, I'd love confirmation whether I'm on track or not." Right? I want to have a regular touch point to see how I'm progressing. And then there might be a very new person to the team that says, "Whew, I need help to find direction." Right? Think about the same people in communication. Somebody might say, "I'm happy with asynchronous communication. One-on-one every month is enough. You find me on Slack for everything else." The next person says, "I prefer a weekly one-on-one. Team meeting is very important for me to connect with other people." Then there's another one that might say, "I love spontaneous huddles to resolve issues quickly." Right? So if you're young and learning, you need more touch points. And if you think about leadership styles, the seasoned veteran might say, "Tell me what my mission is, and I make sure I got everything I need, and then I'm ready to go." Right? I don't need much. Tell me where I'm going, and I'm going there. And then there might be a person that needs more inspirational leadership, right? It's like, okay, I need a purpose, I need a big picture. Tell me why it is worth, right? Tell me why I'm going there. And the new person might say, I want to grow personally. Make sure that I need a lot of leadership and coaching from you to really develop into a better salesperson or whatever that team is, right? So what this means is you have to come up with, what does your organization look like from a structural perspective? What is our general goal setting approach, communication, collaboration, and all of these things that we mentioned? But then to keep the team engaged, you have to look at the individual. And what that individual might look like is something Katharina can show us now in a quick demo of Bluequist.
Yes, especially in remote teams, it's super difficult to know your people, and what they actually need. And therefore, data is super helpful. And I want to show you Bluequist and how Bluequist can provide such data and can, support you to make the right decisions when it comes to, for example, how you lead your employees, but also how to grow as a team, stronger together, especially when you work remote. So let's go to the platform. Just updated it. So this is our demo platform. So let's have a look at the sales team. So here we have a team. So we have a junior sales manager, a senior sales manager, a sales assistant, and a sales director. And they all did their assessments on Bluequist, and everyone has their own profile with all the detailed reports. And what I want to show you now is our team view, which is super helpful for leaders, but also for the team to grow together. So today I want to have a look at the Reese motivation profile. So when you click on it, you get the information. So the Reese motivation profile is a scientifically validated assessment, and it is about the different motives, which are the basis of our behavior, of our thinking, and how we feel. And especially for leading people to really find out what they need, this assessment is super helpful. So let's have a look at our team. So let's have a look at independence. Yeah, what does it mean? So the junior sales manager is rather low in independence, and also Britta, the sales assistant, also rather low in independence. This means they're looking, they're super team players. They love making decisions together. They have a strong sense of unity, and they really like working with other people, and so as Ben said, so maybe for them the team meeting is super important, super important meeting. On the other side, we have Matthias, he's the senior sales manager. You remember the example of Ben, and he is super high in independence. That means he really is autonomous. He really needs his personal freedom. For him, it's not that important to have this team meetings and team gatherings, and for leaders. So for Maria, it's super important to know this, and to understand that Matthias is maybe not joining every time, when he has something to do, and for the others it's super important not to skip this meeting. Okay, let's have a look at curiosity. Curiosity means if you're curious, like the junior sales manager, you really want to learn something, you want to learn something new. And for Maria, this is super helpful, because then she knows, okay, this is what Frank needs to be happy in his job, and she can give him work like this, that he have to discover new things, or that he has a new project. And for example, Matthias isn't that curious, so for him he's better to have his routines, and maybe another interesting thing is acceptance, so for whom feedback is super important. Let's have a look at Frank. Receiving feedback from the manager and also from colleagues, is super important for his work, and he is really sensitive to opinions of others, and so gaining especially positive feedback really empowers him, and helps him to grow. On the other side, for Matthias, feedback isn't that important. He's highly self-confident, and so this acceptance from the manager isn't that important for him. So another thing, let's for example have a look at order. So being high on order means a lot of structure, and I have a need for processes, and if I'm low on order, I'm more flexible, so here all the team members are, or the majority of the team members are on average. This means they have a good balance between the flexibility and the structured process, and this might be also good to know. So what about your team? How is the order there? So maybe you're super low in order and you're really high in flexibility. You're super good when transforming and when you have changes. On the other hand, maybe you miss processes. And this could be helpful to have this knowledge within your team, also to that team members can get along with each other, as they have this awareness what others in the team need. Also social contact, interesting, or idealism. So for Britta, it's super important to have a vision, to have really a purpose in her work. Yeah, and this really keeps her engaged and motivated. So you see, this team view can be super helpful, not only for Maria as a leader to lead the different individuals in her team, but also for the whole team to get to know each other on a deeper level and really address the needs of each other.
With our own team a while back and looking at these things. I mean, obviously you need consent of everybody, right? But it's very, very interesting to do that together, because things become very obvious. Things that you understand implicitly become very obvious when looking at these dimensions together and seeing, okay, this is why sometimes, you do things like that, and sometimes you perceive things like this. It's very, very interesting to do that together. And also I want to add one thing, sorry. It's also very interesting once you have a bigger team to understand by looking at these graphs who might be a very good fit to add to the team. So it's not only about finding out how you manage your existing team, but also if you see patterns in people that respond very well to your organizational setup, then that might inform future hiring decisions, because can also obviously monitor or assess potential candidates. That's also something I found very, very useful.
Thank you, Ben, for adding this. Yeah, super important. This is also super useful for hiring, especially when you then look, what kind of person do I need in my team? Yeah. So, for example, my team is super risk averse, and maybe it's good to have a risky person within the team, to balance it out. Same thing for order, for example. So this is super helpful for leadership, for team development, to grow together as a team, and of course for recruiting, for hiring. Okay, so maybe I stop sharing, and I would like to go with you in discussion. So what do you think? Would you use data to engage your team, or what are your processes in your team?
Hello, hi. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really, really interesting to hear your perspectives from, scientifically, but also tool-wise. It's really interesting. And as for now, we don't use any technology for this, but I think it would be a great opportunity if the team consents, because this gives insights and would help us to work better together. We're a virtually distributed team, and we face some of the challenges that you mentioned also in the presentation. So maybe this would be a good option.
We found that acceptance, I mean, Katharina, you can probably even say more about this, but acceptance is usually pretty high, because people get also these self-assessments that everybody likes. They're from your teenager magazine days, where like, what type are you, right? And it's people like that kind of stuff. So I think, at least in our experience, also recommending that to clients, acceptance has been good, and people are willing to engage in these exercises and these assessments to then use in groups.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Right. You need some kind of openness within the team to share this information. But as you said in the beginning, Ben, it's not about the people, it's about the fit of the people to the situation. So, and I think you should keep this in mind. So there's no good or bad personality or motives. So as I said, with the example of order, so structure and process could be super helpful in one environment, but in another environment, maybe flexibility is more important. So it really depends. So when you keep this in mind, and that you always can add value especially when you fit to the right situation. I think then it's easier to have a look at it together in a team.
Yeah, cool. So maybe you did. I mean, you work with a distributed team, but also Philip, Sebastian. What do you think in your experience, or that could be either your individual experience or also looking at the team or looking at the structure you're working in or you created? What's the most challenging component for engagement in your organization, in your team, in your environment? Anything that pops out specifically that we might have even missed, or from the stuff that we mentioned? Anything that you would like to share?
Most challenging would be talking about results and or define goals which you can achieve. So
Very interesting.
basically just working and just collaborate is not good enough. So if you want to be successful, I guess you need goals and stuff you need to achieve, and you also have to follow up on them and figure out what went good, what went wrong, what should you change. And this is basically the most challenging task within a remote team.
And you know what? I mean, I don't know if you can confirm that, but we oftentimes see, especially in smaller teams, in smaller organizations, is that the most challenging part of this is leadership discipline. What that means is you have to set goals at a certain point in time. You have to define a time frame for them. And then also you have to follow up on, as you said, talk about results, talk about goal achievement based on what you have identified as a goal in the first place. And what we often see is that, especially in small dynamic companies, which is also natural, the goals change dramatically often. And there's hardly any discipline to these processes, right? So like a goal review process, and it could also be, with OKRs, we're talking about a quarterly cadence usually, right? It doesn't have to be a year-long target setting process, but we often find that it's a matter of structure in the first place, right? How do we define them? Where do we store them? Where do we track them? Where do we record progress? But then it's really a question of discipline that's often a problem here. I don't know what your experience with it is why it is so difficult to do that, right?
Totally agreed. And I figured out that most of the time it's a leadership issue, because the team always talk about what they're doing and in a more detailed way.
Yeah.
And if you skip meetings as a leader, you will never hear about results and how the team works and feels.
Yes, very, very good point. And also, it's great that you mentioned this. I mean, I think I've mentioned this in the communication area, but we often, when we come into remote organizations, there's hardly any face-to-face communication. There's a lot of Slack stuff going on, but there's no face-to-face communication. The first thing that we often do is say, okay, let's implement a team meeting and let's implement one-on-one meetings. Now, what happens is that people are very excited at the beginning, and once business kicks in, these things are the first things that are being dropped. And you do that once, and if you do it the second time, the people understand that there's no priority, right? And I think again, my personal take is a lot has to do with discipline. It's the same for meetings, right? As you just mentioned, you can't drop these meetings because then it just doesn't work, right? You have to have FaceTime in order to discuss results and to discuss goals, to discuss progress. And investing that time from a leadership level is really, really important, but also it's a very, very common issue.
Yeah, super true. And you really have to keep in mind this working together within a team and really fostering your team that it can grow together, especially in a virtual environment. This is super, super important. And yeah, you have to work on it ongoing. Yeah, so yeah, this is helpful when you then have the data to support it. And I think it doesn't take a lot. So if you have this these meetings on different contents and different functions, and for example you have a short check-in question, or you use Blue Quiz and have a look at your profiles and just talk 5 minutes about it before you start a meeting. So then you have a great routine which foster really the team cohesiveness. So yeah, I think this could be helpful. What are other challenges you're faced in the virtual environment regarding engagement?
Yeah, for me, it's also transparency. I know that you mentioned this, but this is really a big topic, like in all directions, basically, like to the team, from the board to us. I don't know, like, I think this is just such a big topic, and we have so many meetings, and still like so much information is missing. So, and I wonder how this can happen.
What do you think is the reason for that? How I mean, how do you spend so much time? Because I think it's very common, but what do you think would have to change in order to make that better, to improve that?
I think we would need a better structure, like more structure, so that everyone knows where to place information, like like what you said, Katharina, with like if you have routine meetings that follow a certain sequence, I think this would really help. And now we have some topics in this meeting, then other topics in the other meeting, but then some people are not present and so on. So it's really, really difficult. And so I think transparency in this virtual environment is a big challenge. Or how do you experience this?
I mean, just quick one, because we just finished off a client project where this was, they were very explicit about this issue, and what they said, we want to create a documentation first culture. And it's a term I hadn't come across before, but basically what they said is we are remote, so we have to make sure that everything is findable for everyone, right? Because you just can't go ask. So basically, what they spend a lot of time and effort, and are still doing that, in developing a good company wiki structure, right? And then also implementing it, like, how do we where do we store documentation? How do we make sure that things are being documented there? How do we make sure that each person in the team is able to find, what the latest strategic decision is, what this and that is, how this works, right? So way beyond the classical, onboarding or whatever, but really the question on how do you share both static and dynamic information across an organization. And we find that company wikis, standard operating procedures, these kind of tools with, also with a great tool set by now out there can really help. But it's the tool is always one thing. The question is then how do you apply it? How do you make sure that this actually comes to life? Because also to these things, there's a high risk of them dying a lonely death by not being used, right? So, Katharina, I don't know if you have any other additions to that.
No, but I think this is a great idea. Yes, definitely, and really important. But yes, so people start with something like that, and then it dies. So we have to find a way.
It does, and the engagement into these things is critical and important to achieve. Critical and difficult to achieve, because the thing is, if you try to create some form of knowledge base, a wiki that you just throw out there and then it sits there, then it will just die. But if you find a way to engage people in contributing, which is mainly the thing that you can do, and then also it's a leadership task, right? But if you find a good way of engaging people to contribute to that thing, to make comments, to improve the content that sits there, then also we had clients that use Notion for documentation. We use Notion for our documentation, and in Notion the nice templates to run your meetings in there, right? So the more stuff you can actually put into your company wiki environment that forces people to go there to do their work, for example, meeting, for example, so project management, whatever that is, that can help to also increase adoption of these tools. But it's very, very difficult to achieve that, but it's doable. I mean, there are many companies that are very good at that.
And I think it's all about the people. So how the people support each other in this, and maybe also the social pressure. So for example, we also document everything. So we use Confluence, and also we document all the meetings so that everyone who's not around can have a look. So what was talked in this meeting, what are the results, what are the decisions which are made. And we also remind ourselves. So have you done your documentation? This is important. I think this is pretty cool. And also to support each other, and that there's no wrong, or so that you can just be open and do your stuff. And we have really good failure culture. I think this could be also really helpful when it comes to documentation and being transparent all over the place.
Yeah, very good addition here. I think it's really, you know, if you don't dare to add something to your documentation because it might be wrong in how you do it, then you won't, right? So I think this having a good culture of how you deal with mistakes is very, very important. Any other findings, personal experiences that you might see from your workspace with regards to engagement of remote teams and why this is so complicated, or maybe also an interesting way on how your team or you yourself tackle that? It would also be probably interesting for everybody. Something that you might have seen working very well.
Or maybe another question. So what keeps you engaged?
Sebastian?
What keeps me engaged is having a personal vision and also like a plan of a future me, let's say. So
Growth, right?
yes, with the company. So if I feel that my manager isn't on the same page, it will be getting complicated. So I think you need to talk with your managers, with your leadership team, and you have to figure out what's your growth plan, and if it fits, it's good. If not, you won't be happy there.
Yeah, but also it's a good thing to realize that early, right? To understand if you have different trajectories. And I think, I mean, it's something we also see a lot with our clients. Again, oftentimes something for smaller organizations where they struggle with, there's no formalized development in place, right? It's you oftentimes sit on the position, and then the question is, what's the progression? What's the next level of growth? Where am I developing? And then the other question also is with regards to Bluequist, then, like, does everybody want that? Or, people might have different areas of development that they want to, that are relevant for them. So I think both of the things, formalizing some form of personal development plans, and that doesn't have to be hierarchical, right? Sometimes it is, often can be, but doesn't have to be. And then combining this with a very individualized approach on understanding, as you said, you have to agree with your boss or however your company is structured on what personal growth would look like. But it's a very, very, very valid point, because if you don't see growth, then usually people go into that mode of quiet quitting. That's very, very true. Judith, you wanted to say something as well, I think, just now? Yeah, there she is. You're on mute, but we can't hear you. Interesting. Maybe the microphone doesn't play along. It's almost 6 p.m. here in Europe, so microphone might just call it a day. We still can't hear Judith, unfortunately.
Here
we go.
By really interesting tasks and no routine. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you just now. Maybe you can repeat what you just said. Now we hear you.
Okay. Oh, it's no problem at all. I think it's time to no, just kidding. I'm engaged by interesting tasks, and as long as there is no routine and stuff. So yeah.
Again, I think it's a question of how you structure work, how you collaborate, how do you set goals. Also, what's the company like in the end, right? I mean, they are just very repetitive job profiles, right? So it's again a question of fit. Because again, personal situation could also be that you say, I want to work from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and want to be done with my work by then. I don't want to take any of that stuff, be it either in form of actual work or in terms of thought, into my rest of the day, because I have family members to take care of or whatever, right? So it's a question of personal situation, but I think for many people, it's very important to have like evolving tasks, not too much repetition, interesting things. But that's again something I think where you sit on that continuum is very interesting to understand, and then trying to either put people into the right places in the organization or find fitting tasks based on that. But it's there has to be a good fit. I agree.
fully agree, Ben.
Yes,
So
definitely. Yeah.
super important.
All right. So any other further follow-up questions, comments, additions?
I'm good. So thanks for the presentation. Thanks for your input. Was quite helpful.
Also, thank you for being so engaged. That was very good. Really enjoyed the discussion here. Katharina, you want to have the closing remarks?
Yeah, so thank you very much for joining. We had a look at quiet quitting. We saw that this is not a new problem, but we understand now why it is trending at the moment. And we talked a lot about what are the challenges in remote teams regarding engagement and how we can keep our employees engaged. That is a really individual to everyone, and yeah, that you as a leader or as a colleague can do a lot to keep your team engaged. And yeah, and data might can help here, and the right processes as well. So thank you very much for joining, and we are sending you the presentation and some additional information. And yeah, see you the next time, I would say.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
And rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.